Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to Which Bitch, where we talk the real tea. And today we're talking about ancient Egypt. So, this is the second episode of this new segment that we're doing, where we talk about ancient civilizations. I mean, I really do think that this segment is going to grow from here, but at the moment, we're talking about ancient civilizations of all sorts. Last episode was Atlantis, and now we're kind of going into. I really like this topic because with Atlantis, it's all kind of there's not much mainstream opinion about it because mainstream just don't have an opinion. They just don't think it is real. But this time it's really interesting to see the mainstream's manipulation around this because it's so obvious. Like, I didn't even realize how obvious it was until diving into it. So I'm excited to get into that stuff. So yeah, are you ready to begin, Mum? Do you have any
I
other
am, yeah.
Okay. So I've got my notebook, and this time I was a lot more organized with my handwriting and, the layout of my notes, so I'm not flipping through. But I feel like a really good point to start on is the Great Pyramid of Giza, which is like the biggest one. Just because, classic ancient Egypt. So, what is taught in school, what I was taught and what I think has been taught to everyone, is that the pyramid was built under the reign of Pharaoh Khufu about 4,500 years ago. And it was built in 20 years, 2 decades, to build that giant structure. And I really want to dive into this because it's actually mind-blowing to me that they even thought that was appropriate to put out there.
So
Especially
they
saying
thought
that
we
it's
would buy it.
Oh, yeah, but we are, because we're not what we're learning is their side of the story, which is all just manipulation. But when you actually look into it, there's no chance at all that that's real. So to build the pyramids, the Egyptians not only built, it's called the Cairo Plateau or the something plateau. I don't know. But it's like a big, almost kind of cliff that they're building on. Like all the pyramids and the Sphinx and all that, it's on this high up landmass. So they would have to haul up all the materials up that. So that's one thing. The other thing is this pyramid is made of 2.2 million stones or 2 million stones or something. It's 2 million stones that weigh 2.5 tons. So like
Each or all together?
each, no, each, like each stone is 2.5 tons.
Wow.
And yeah, and they couldn't have used a ramp. This has been absolutely debunked because to build a ramp and being able to drag up the stones, like how mainstream says they would with like ropes, it would have to be a max of 5 degrees, going like a 5-degree increase, if you know what I mean.
Incline.
And yeah, incline, thank you. And to build that much of an incline, like it's a really long ramp, like really long, and it would still be there. It's not something that you could just build out of sand because it would just collapse if you're hauling up all these stones on there. So it would have to be a permanent structure in order to even think about doing that.
So
So
is there any information on how they did it? Or do they tell us how they think they did it?
so the only information that we have on how they did it is speculation. And I will be going into some really weird things that kind of coincide with we have no idea how they did this. And I think at the end, when we talk about our spiritual looks on this sort of stuff, would be a good time to delve into that because there are so many options based off of all of the things that I'm going to be talking about because we don't really know. Like it's all just there's no conclusion really on how to do that in the science world, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So we don't know how they actually lifted up. We just know how they didn't. And so yeah, there's 2 million stones. Um, it's aligned with Orion's belt, and um, it's literally this pyramid, this Great Pyramid of Giza, is facing 3/60ths of an inch away from true north. So that's kind of crazy because even in the 17th century, we couldn't get, like, we were 5 times less accurate with our alignment with true north. And that was when we had better technology, obviously, because it's 17th century. So even then we weren't as good as the ancient Egyptians. So I mean, there's a lot of things that go into the alignment. Like, there's literally a global level to this. Like, there's lines going across the earth of other pyramids that line up with the Great Pyramid of Giza. But I'm not going to go into that because that's like a whole other thing, linking to other ancient civilizations. So there's that goes into it, the alignment on the earth and to the stars. And I think to really put it into context of how diabolical this 20-year time frame is, there was a temple in this that was rebuilt in the 60s because this temple called Abu Simbel was going to be flooded, and so they planned a construction to move it up. And this temple was only 2,200 stones, and they had modern technology like cranes and trucks, and it took them 5 years to rebuild this structure, 900 times less than the pyramids, and it took them 5 years with our technology today. So to say that it's even possible to build this thing in 20 years is just crazy to me. um so yes, another thing about the pyramid, this is sacred geometry, mum. So the half of the perimeter of the base, so say like we have a square. Do I have a square anywhere? Pretend this is a square, okay? So one half is equal to, whatever number, and then the height is y. So this will be x for my explanation purposes, and then the height of the pyramid will be y. So x divided by y is equal to pi, no matter what measurement you put. So whether it's in meters or, centimeters, it's always equal to pi. That, um, you know, uh, division, mathematical equation. And then that same x, where it's like this, divided by the whole height of the pyramid. So above, and also the pyramid goes underground as well. So the whole height of the pyramid, so x divided by the whole height, is equal to the golden ratio squared, which is crazy. And then also there's the inner chamber of the Great Pyramid, and that also leads to the golden ratio as well. So in every single part of this pyramid, you can find sacred geometry very, very easily if you know how to look for it. So that's another big thing about that's kind of like, okay, they're not telling that, they're not telling us that in the history books. It's kind of left out. Another huge thing that's left out about this pyramid that blew my mind, like absolutely crazy. And I don't know if you know this, but the Great Pyramid of Giza is 8 sides. It's not 4 sides.
All right.
On each, yeah, on each side there is like a concavity, but it's split in half. So the concavity isn't just like disheveled; it's exactly directed in half. So it's kind of like I don't even know what this shape is, but almost like a star, but very slight. Like you can't really notice it. And the only reason why we noticed it is because the Air Force were flying over Cairo on an equinox, and they noticed, I don't know if the pyramid's supposed to be doing that, because what was happening was half of one side of the pyramid, like one face, was in shadow, and then the other half of that same side was in pure sunlight. And so obviously flat surfaces don't do that. So then they called like this expert Egyptologist, mathematician dude. And we're like, yeah, we took this photo of the pyramid. It's kind of weird. We think you should check it out. And so scientists were looking into this concavity, and the mainstream story about it is um, that it's just happened over time, like it's just deterioration and the pyramid collapsing. It's absolutely ridiculous. This is why I love talking about this, because it's absolutely insane. I encourage anyone who is watching this to go search up Pyramid of Giza 8 sides, and you'll on Google Images all these air shots, like aerial shots of the pyramid. It's exactly symmetrical. And another crazy thing, like, you know how I mentioned about half of it was in shadow and the other half was in light? That only happens on both equinoxes each year. It's like on the south side of the pyramid, this miraculous phenomena happens, and the mainstream just says, oh yeah, that whole thing, that was just an accident. Over time, the pyramid's just collapsing. And it's so ridiculous. Like, it's so dumb. Experts, engineers, architects have looked at these concavities and they say, absolutely no way are these natural. Like, is this natural collapse? If it was really collapsing, you would see it from the inside. There would be cracks everywhere. It would not be safe to go in. Like, tourism would be shut down. Like, you couldn't go in this pyramid if that was the case. And not only that, these are not natural breaks. Like, things don't collapse symmetrically on all sides.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, the 9/11 collapsing of the building sort of story. Like, yeah, just buildings don't do that. They don't symmetrically collapse on every side in the center of it. And then on the equinox, it just happens that day, twice a year, this phenomena happens. It's just so dumb. Anyway, so that was a really awesome point that I learnt through my research. And there's also a documentary on YouTube at the end of this. Once we've done filming this, I'm going to put a comment down on all sources that I've looked into if anyone's interested. And I'll put this documentary on that's on YouTube. And it's called The Revelations of Ancient Egypt, I believe, or The Revelation of the Pyramids. And at the end, they talk about how the pyramid is kind of a calendar. So that would be an interesting thing to look at. And I'm not going to go into that because it goes into so much stuff that I just can't explain and don't really understand. So if you're interested in that, I'll put the link in the description. So yeah, that was really interesting. And I think something else that a lot of people forget about is the upper chamber and all the chambers inside the pyramids. Like, this really went into the construction, and we just kind of think of it as the outside, but even just in the like in these chambers, these stones were literally transported 500 miles. They weigh ridiculous amount of weight, like ridiculous amount of weight. And then they were also lifted 210 feet above ground. So a huge amount of work went into this. And it's not something that can just happen in 20 years. Like, it's just insane. So, yes. Now going into some more sacred geometry, the ancient Egyptians, their measurement was a cubit. And modern day science, it's like kind of confusing because now when you look it up, they say, oh, the cubit is all different no matter, like, because there's kind of like a ruler that ancient Egyptians used that we've found. And all they say, all the ones that we found are all different and not the same measurement. But when you look at before this claim, like in the 1930s, 20, like in the 20s and stuff, there was actual conclusions made on how big the cubit was, like what the actual measurement was. And that measurement was declared to be around 0.5253 to 0.523, oh, sorry, 0.5235 to 0.5236 centimeters, I believe. Anyway, it doesn't really matter what measurement in our system it correlates to. Just remember the number 0.5236 and 35. Just remember that number, because these rulers are so intricate. They are literally like our rulers today. Like, you know how you have the centimeters and then the inches on the other side, and then you have the millimeters. They had that, and it was 5-sided. It was like this long pentagram like tube, and on every side they had like information on it. And it just the amount of detail that went into these, like it was not something that was just declared and brushed to the side to be different in each one. Like obviously I think there will be some little differences, but overall like it's not something that just they kind of brush over. And like these are really precise. Like I'll go into the precision of some of the ancient Egyptian artifacts that have been found, and precision is a huge factor in all of ancient Egypt. So their measurement system isn't something that just gets mistaken and changed and like is different with each person. So I don't really know where the mainstream is getting this information from. But what's important to realize is that 3,100, no, 3,100, oh no, 31,416. So that's pi minus 2,618. That's the numbers of pi, of the golden ratio squared. So even though they're not 0 point, blah, 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 these are the numbers of pi and the golden ratio squared. They equal to 5,236. What is the cubit? 0.5236. So they're using sacred geometry in their measurements to do all these sorts of things, like to build the pyramid, to make sculptures and all this. And that's why I believe there's so much sacred geometry everywhere, because they're using sacred geometry in their measurement system.
Mm.
So that's really freaky. And the amount of symmetry that is in some of their statues, like there's this statue called the Statue of Ramses or something at Luxor, I believe. And this guy noticed how symmetrical it was. I mean, everyone kind of knew that it was, but this guy was like set on it. And he put it in a computer system, like the photo of it, and he like put it in a computer program and lined up mirrored images and then overlaid them, and it was perfect. Like there was not one single thing wrong, and this is from all angles. So this is obviously like a 3D sculpture, so it was from
Mm.
the side, it was from the back, it was from every single angle. And the front, this is a sculpture of a face. Like it's got a nose, two eyes, lips, and it like cheekbones, and everything is symmetrical. And that's not possible. Like a human hand cannot do that unless maybe they're like super tapped in and maybe like hardcore meditating. That's what I think. But as far as today's world, a human cannot do that. Just especially with the tools that mainstream said that they have. Like that's a whole other story. But mainstream science just says, and Egyptology just says they had copper chisels and then a round stone that they would smack on the stone to carve it away. And that just, it's again one of those things where it's like, do you really, really expect us to believe that?
So
Um,
what do you think it was that made that statue?
I don't know, because like what I imagine when I imagine the creation of it is someone really tapped in doing it, like a genius sort of level, because I really do believe that they were geniuses because of where they were consciously um, on the earth plane. So
Yeah,
I think
right.
that's a really big possibility, because a lot of people who are looking into this, like into ancient Egypt and the holes in the story, they believe in ancient technologies, or that they had machinery of some kind. And I do believe that yes, that is a possibility, But I don't want to just stray away from the spiritual side of it, because I think that has a really big part to play. Because, like, again, sacred geometry in this sculpture. So when this guy was noticing, oh my god, this is perfectly symmetrical, he was then going in the computer system and like putting Fibonacci's and circles, and found the golden ratio all over the place. Like, oh, even just the angle, like, so looking up at the bottom of the nose, like, it's crazy. Again, another link that I'll put in the comments if you want to go check it out, because there's an amazing video about it. But it's just insane. It's everywhere in this statue. And this isn't the only statue. This is just one statue. There's so many that are perfectly symmetrical. And it's all over the place. Another really crazy sort of artifact that's been found are these 40,000 stone pots. 40,000 of these that were found like under a pyramid or something. And Egyptologists have dated them back to the first dynasty, like the earliest times of ancient Egypt, because that's the only time it makes sense. But the only reason that they have dated it back to these and have said it as fact is because there's these like really weird etchings. And I call it etchings because it's really like someone grabbed a sharp stone or something, like, I don't even know, and just put their name on it. Like, that's really what it looks like. And these pots are incredible. Like, they are just mind-boggling. Even if we wanted to create these pots today, it would be a real challenge, and some of them not even possible.
Why is that?
And we know, well, because we know that they're carved, and they're carved from some of these stones that they used. I don't know what the stone itself is called, but some of the stones that they use are actually harder than steel. And they've carved it. And that's by the serrations on the inside and the outside. Like, there's these little lines that you could see were used to carve. And then there's this, so there's millions, like, oh, not millions, 40,000 of these pots. But there's some that are really curvy. Like, imagine a prawn chip. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, right.
Or like an ice cream bowl, like a glass, like kind of frilly almost.
Yeah.
And to do that with stone, and it's like really thin too. It's not thick and bulky, like, it's thin. And we don't know how that was possible, because you're going to be using hard tools, because these stones are harder than steel. Well, some of them anyway. And like, how is that possible? And then they're also polished to absolute shine and like perfection. And there's this one artifact that I really want to talk about, and it's kind of another thing that's blown my mind. It's called the schist disc, and again, Google it. It's insane. But oh my god, it annoys me so much. Egyptologists say that it's like a pot or a vase, but all it is like this crazy frilly sort of, it's also got like a ring and then frills on the inside of the ring. And then in the center, there's just this hole. So it's like a disc with a hole in it. You can't use that as a vase. What are you putting in there? Because there's nothing to hold the water. So it's not a vase. It's not even a plate. Because what would you would have a giant hole in your plate. So it's just so dumb. But why I want to talk about this is because, so one of the awesome girls that I've also linked in the comments after this video is posted, I really enjoy her content, and she talks about ancient civilizations, and she went to Egypt and filmed it all. And she went on a tour guide who is a chematologist, which Kemet is just Egypt before Egypt was Egypt. It's like the original native sort of word for Egypt. And so chematologists are more into the origin story, like the stories that have been passed down through their ancestors that are Egyptian. Like it's really more about the culture and learning from the culture than just learning from whatever the hell Egyptologists are learning from, because I have no idea. But anyway, so the tour guide that was on this girl's Egypt tour was a chematologist, and his father was like one of the wise wisdom keepers, and he also researched and looked into the schist disc, and they made a prototype of this schist disc and put it on like a wooden pyre sort of stick rod kind of thing, and then they started spinning around on this rod. Now, again, no way to prove this. So, what I'm about to say, you take on, if you believe it, you choose what you want to do with this information, because it's not online, obviously, because it's really crazy, as you're about to know. But so they spun this schist disc around and then was projecting sound frequencies at it, and it created an energy infinity loop, like an energy vortex almost in front of it. And it was like creating this infinity loop of energy with the sound waves. And this was like recorded by their machines. And I don't know if they could see it physically. I just know that that's what their conclusion was. And then they began throwing things at this energy field, and it would hover in place and then fall. Like it would literally change gravity. Like it's so insane. So like I think that's just a really big part of the whole spiritual side of it, of ancient Egypt, that these people had ancient technologies but not in the way that we see it today. And I believe that they could use things like this schist disc to create the wonders that we know today. I remember, do you know that guy on Gaia who remembers his past lives, and that includes like Egypt and Atlantis and all that?
Yeah,
Do you know Mark
Stefano.
DiStefano or something?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. He talks about ancient Egypt and it all surrounding sound, and that's how they built the pyramids, and the pyramids aren't what they're told to be, because the pyramids are said to be tombs, which I will go into that also, because that's another really stupid thing. But yeah, he talks about
Tell us what you really
um,
think, Juliet.
well, I am, because it's like I don't know, I'm passionate about it, and it's just so amazing to know that they're lying. Like, because I've always known that there's so many lies out there, but never, I just knew that they were lying. I didn't know the truth of it. And now discovering the truth of it has been really amazing. But yeah, anyway, Mark DiStefano was talking
Mm.
about how sound energy was a really big part of ancient Egypt. I mean, I think that's just proof in the fact that all their like traditions are oral, and all their stories were oral until hieroglyphs came, a part of it. But originally it was all just oral, and it's still a lot of the wisdom is just oral wisdom. Um, so yeah, um, really big thing to think about there. That schist disc is crazy, and haven't been able to stop thinking about it. Like it's literally so incredible. Um, and another thing was the huge statues that they have. Um, they have like statues in all sorts of places, but there's these really big ones in the Colossi of Memnon. And these statues are the biggest ones that we know of, and they weigh 1,300 tons and were
Wow.
lifted and carried. And I was watching this in a documentary, and they were like interviewing Egyptologists, and they were asking the Egyptologists, so like, why do you think it was really possible to lift these statues with just string and like just rope and pure human force? And he said, oh, well, the fact that they're behind me proves that. Like, they're so close-minded to other possibilities. Like, there's really a strong belief about how ancient civilizations and ancient peoples were just primitive and basic human beings, and like didn't have the resources that we do today and aren't as intelligent as us. And so, yeah, I just thought that was such an interesting like perspective. The fact that they're behind me proves that. Like not even being open to other theories that make more sense. Um so yeah, and there's huge obelisks, like huge tall obelisks that we have no idea how they got it. Not only had to transport it from out of the quarry, but also lift it up, because the quarries were like rocky, really rocky. It was like not a flat surface that you could just drag a giant thing over. Like there's huge rocks in the way, and there's really incredible barriers that you can't just lift. No matter how many people you have, I can't imagine ever being able to lift it over these rocks from the quarry, and then, you know, however many miles to the sacred site.
So all of this research has created doubt in your mind about the Egyptologist's explanation and the accepted explanations over the years for how these monoliths, how these um, statues and pyramids have come to rest where they are.
Mm.
Um, so is your research just creating more questions in your mind, or are you coming to conclusions as to how these things happened?
Oh,
Are you speculating just from your own ideas, or are you getting clues from your research?
I'm getting clues. But also, I think it's a mix of both because, you know, I've only spent, you know, about just over a week researching, which is a lot, yeah, but in the scheme of things, like in the whole picture, it's not that
Mm,
much.
mm,
But even in just the small amount that I have, um, in some areas, I'm like, oh, that's something there, like with the schist disc. But then in other things, it's like, no, I still have no idea, but I don't really hold too much of a perspective. I'm really just freely sharing my ideas. Like I don't really hold a firm belief about, you know,
yeah,
how
right.
things were done. It's just I'm throwing ideas out there.
And you're just saying, and you're kind of saying what they're asking us to believe is almost as
Yeah.
ridiculous as the pyramid being there in the first place.
Yes. Well, yeah, the only thing that I'm firmly saying is that what the mainstream story is not true.
Yeah,
That's the
right.
only thing that I'm firmly saying. Cuz it's just so mind-boggling. Like you get more confused looking into it their way than you ever do looking at it through this lens.
Yeah, right.
Because I have, like, obviously, I that's what I learnt at school. That's what I believed for many years, and it was just like, okay, we don't really know, but this is what we think happened,
Mm,
and just leaving it at that. But this time, going in with my own, you know, I'm the leader of my own beliefs, and I'm the leader of my own discovery and my own adventure through this, and not just being told what to believe.
mhm.
So yeah, but I definitely don't hold any firm beliefs about how they did things. I just hold the firm belief that what's being told to us is not true. That's the
Yeah.
only thing that I really strongly believe. Because another example of just is not even the ignorance, because I know that they did this. I don't know, but I think that they did this on purpose. So the Sphinx was said for many years to be built like 3,000 to 4,500 years ago. Um, and that's just what we accepted. That was what was taught as fact. And then this university teacher, I think he was a geology teacher or something, he was visiting Cairo and noticed all these water erosion, like all this water erosion around the wall of the Sphinx. It's like almost like a retaining wall that was built at the same time as the Sphinx. We know that. and then also on the Sphinx itself. And this water erosion could only occur from heavy rainfall over long periods of time. I mean, many geologists and scientists say like over thousands of years. Um, so that would mean the last time that heavy rainfall ever hit Egypt was 5,000 years ago. And then you have to go at least a little bit further than that to get to the heavy rainfall erosion that we are seeing today, which means that they're wrong about the dating. And it's interesting because you Google it now and it says, Google says, well, we believe it's 3,000 to, whatever time ago. But recent studies have showed it may not be that. Which is, yeah, it's not that. Like, you can't look at that erosion and still say, oh, no, but it's still probably, or still not fully accept, no, it has to be at least 5,000 years ago. Because it's right there in front of you. Like, the erosion is right there. There's nothing you can say against it because it's physical evidence in front of your eyes. And another thing about the Sphinx is that the head is really small compared to the body. And so what has been sort of suggested over time was that it was actually a lion head, and then it was redone into the pharaoh head that we know today, which can be done. Someone actually, I think a carver or something, a sculpturist, a sculptor, um, proved that it could be done. So yeah, that's an interesting thing. So I there's really no way to date these sorts of works, like the pyramids, anything stone, even the pots. They say that it's dated to, early dynastic Egypt, the pots I'm talking about. But that's only based on the etchings on the pots, not because of the pots, because you can't date stone. I don't really know why. I think it's because stone is billions of years old, so like you can't really date it. Especially you can't date carved stone or anything like that's been carved, because it takes off the layers of the stone, and I think that's the only way that they could even slightly tell the age of stone.
They could
Um
possibly tell, well, they could possibly say the stone was X amount of years old, but when it was carved,
yeah,
wouldn't be obvious because the stone could have been on Earth for a million years before they touched it. So
exactly.
there would be two different dates, wouldn't they? Because the stone
Yeah.
existed already on Earth, and then they would have had to carve it. So yeah,
Yeah, they can't really do anything about
yeah. So they can't
stone
say when they were
artifacts.
carved. Yeah, because they don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And that's what Egyptologists do throughout. It's a huge theme. Um, statues, huge statues in temples. Like, the only reason that they're given a date is because of the carving on their belt that links them to a person, and then they date that back to that person. But the only thing is with that, there was statues in that same temple that didn't have any inscription on the belt, almost like they had a backlog, like a storage of these statues, and then would pull them out and then carve them to match, whoever they wanted the statue to be.
Mm.
So we don't know. Same with the pyramids, same with the Sphinx. I mean, the water erosion enough is a lot to say that it was very, very, very old. Um, so it's just really interesting to look into that. And a lot of people think that the pyramids and the Sphinx and a lot of the mysteries of ancient Egypt were actually built before Egyptians got there, and then Egyptians just kind of made it their own and put their hieroglyphs on there, or something like that.
Yeah, right.
Like, there's crystal caves in the temple of Kemet. I think, no, not Kemet. Karnak. Sorry, Karnak. And Karnak is a really interesting one. There's a lot of things that kind of just are a bit confusing. Like, they have crystal caves that have like got all these hieroglyphs on them, but the hieroglyphs a lot of the time aren't polished inside, but the stone is polished. And this is on another artifact as well that is found in Karnak. And that kind of says, well, why would they not polish the insides when they polished the stone on the outside? It means they probably had different tools or was done at a different time by possibly later Egyptians. And so this is another mind-blowing one that's really a smoking gun to me when it comes to the spiritual side of ancient Egypt, and why I believe that a lot of spirituality went into the civilization, because there are these kind of like pillars, sort of rectangular doorways of these like pillars kind of, and they're all inscripted with hieroglyphs. And through translation of the hieroglyphs, we can know that Egyptians saw these as stargates, because it's literally written on the doorway, on the stargate. So they saw it as stargate, these weird things. And there's two of them. There's one at the Temple of Karnak, and then the other one is at the Ramesseum. So there's two that have the same hieroglyphs, they're matching. And what is so weird about these stargates is that on the inside of these pillars, it's fully melted. The stone has been melted and then hardened again. And it's granite. Granite, I googled it. Granite takes, I've written it down somewhere. It's like 1,215 degrees Celsius to 1,260 degrees Celsius. It takes that amount of temperature to melt granite. But the thing is, it's only melted on the inside. The outside is fine. Like, you wouldn't be able to tell. The only reason that we could tell was because they were cracked. And these are huge, huge, huge pillars. Who cracked these things? Like, how can they be cracked? But they were only cracked on the outside. On the inside, it was like fully melted. And they're called stargates. Like, to me, that seems like major energy was running through these things, and I don't even know. Could be a portal. Could be. I honestly have no idea. It just confuses me how stone can melt, but only on the inside, and leave the outside to be fine. And like, you can still read the hieroglyphs on it. Like, that's literally to the point of how okay these stargates are. And both stargates are cracked on each site. As far as the melting goes, I don't know if they're both melted. I just know the one at Karnak is melted. But based off of the images that I saw, I could kind of tell that both of them were melted on the inside. So, like, at both sites.
And is
So,
there an explanation given for that?
no, scientists have no idea. We have no idea how that happened. We don't know how they even, like, how do you even get temperatures at that high back then? I mean, I guess pizza ovens. Like, do pizza ovens get that hot? Like, I don't know. I truly don't understand how that happened. Because even then, like, pizza ovens would melt the outside. So I don't really I don't really know. Like, it's just so confusing, and we have no idea how it happened. But yeah, I think the stargates are a good segue into chematology, which I kind of brought up earlier. And how I was saying chematology is kind of like, or chematism is the beliefs and the traditions of the native people of Egypt, all the way up until Egypt was not Egypt anymore and was called Kemet. So they have origin stories of how Egypt came to be, and they actually say that there was an island involved, and this island was destroyed in a day and a night, and then the survivors came to Egypt and um, became Egypt and taught them like became and you know their survival eventually became Egypt, and they taught Egyptians how to build things like architecture. They taught them math, astrology, all the things that we know today, and all the things that kind of make sense to me about the alignment of the stars with the pyramids and the sacred geometry and in the concaves in the pyramid and how that aligned with the equinox. It's just crazy. So
So this
this
island,
actually,
this
oh
island,
yeah.
this island that they that got destroyed in a night and a day. Do they
Mm.
say? Are you reading what this island was, or where it was, or is there a name
Atlantis
to this
is
island?
no, because Atlantis is the Greek name for it. I'm as far as the name goes, I don't know.
So
If
you
that
think that
said,
it was Atlantis?
I do. To me, that makes the most sense. And this wasn't just oral history being passed down. They actually wrote this down. This story was written down at the Temple of Edfu. And I watched people go there and asking the tour guide to translate for them. And this tour guide had been translating the whole time through this Temple of Edfu. And then they got to this part of it that in the hieroglyphs where it was talking about this island. And the tour guide wanted to just keep going. And they put him back and was like, "Oh no, can you translate this?" And he was like, "Well, I don't really know how to read hieroglyphs that well, and I don't want to stuff it up." And then they were asking, "Well, what's your personal um, knowledge of this story that they're trying to tell in your own words?" And he just was so brief and just didn't really go into it. And so that was kind of weird. To me, that kind of says that someone was there telling him, "Don't translate that," you know? Um, so yeah, they do. A lot of people believe that ancient Egypt and Atlantis were linked through this uh, hieroglyph and through the beliefs. I mean, there's also the Temple of Sais, where it's now underwater, and I'm pretty sure it can't be confirmed, but you remember in Atlantis, I was telling you about how Solon, the great, 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 great uncle of Plato, went to Egypt, and then that's where he heard about Atlantis. So he heard about this story in the Temple of Sais
Right.
by the ancient priests, and I'm pretty sure it's said that the story of Atlantis is in this temple. But now the temple is underwater, and it's kind of funny that no one's really gone down to look at this temple and what it says in the walls. Like no one's really gone down to have a look. Yeah, but it is said that it's also in that temple. But like how I was saying before in Kemetology, the wisdom keepers, it was all mainly maybe mainly oral uh, traditions. So even though some things made it to hieroglyphs, a lot of the knowledge isn't set in stone, literally.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like dying off now, and there's not as many wisdom keepers, there's not as many people who are really knowledgeable about it. And also scientists just, I mean, we all know how they are, the mainstream at least, just doesn't really recognize what they're saying as any sort of truth. And but it really correlates to a lot of the mysteries of ancient Egypt. Like it really is explaining more to us than what the mainstream story is. Because it's just like, oh no, that was by accident. Oh no, it was built in 20 years. Oh no, it was built 4,500 years ago. Oh no, now it might have been built, a bit later than that. Like it's just, and like, oh, the reason why we're dating that is because of this horrible etching that literally looks like a child did it compared to the actual thing. So that's when it was made, and it's just really. annoying and frustrating that that's the main story, because I would actually really love to know more about these chematism beliefs, and I think I'm gonna, buy a book about it or read a bit more online. But they talk about everything to do with the Egyptian history, and I would like to know through their eyes, because if I'm going to believe anyone, it's going to be them. Out of the two sides, it's going to be them. So yeah, it's just crazy. Do you have any questions so far?
No, this was really good. Like it's pretty clear that your research has brought up a lot of interesting questions, and that the what we are asked to believe by mainstream science and Egyptologists is pretty far fetched,
Mm,
and that we can see if we take the time to ask the questions and to really research into something like this, we can see the contradictions. They're glaringly obvious,
mm,
and all it takes is a little bit of curiosity and care. You just have to care to want to know.
yeah.
And I think that's part of the charm of what you're doing, is that you care and you want to know the answers to these questions. And so looking into it and sharing it with us um, is contagious. It's kind of like, it makes you kind of go, oh, that's weird.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah. So high five, Missy.
Thank you.
High
I
five.
I yeah, thanks. It was really fascinating, and like there's still so much more. I think a part two one time. I mean, I think I would like to move on to another topic, because it's kind of
Mm,
just
yeah.
all my brain is ancient Egypt. But eventually doing a part two, because there's still so much more to talk about. Like there's saw cuts. I mean, when you look closely at things, I was really under the belief that, oh, even though I noticed that, I'm not an expert, so I can't have
Mm,
an opinion.
yeah.
And what this is really it's really given me permission to be like, no, it's okay. Like you might know more, or you might be bringing in a new perspective that hasn't been seen or looked through before through my
Mm,
perspective. Um, and that's what happens all the time. Like there's these saw cuts in some of the megalithic stones and some of the work of these temples, and it's a mistake. So there's like a saw cut, and then it kind of goes off angle, and then they bring it back up, and then they go straight.
mm,
And that can't be done with chisels or any sort of hand tool, because you're going millimeter speed, like painfully slow. And if you
yeah.
could see that you're going off angle, you can fix it up, and it's 1 millimeter off. You're fine. But when it's high speed tools, you can do that. You can make a mistake and be like, oh shit, gotta recalibrate there and then
Yeah.
fix it. And this happens all the time. Like there's so many examples of this. And the cuts are clean, really, really precise and sharp. Like there's so many examples of tombs, of like these weird granite boxes that I won't go into, but perfect precision. Like you cannot do this by hand. You cannot do this by hand where we are at. And I think the Egyptians were smarter than us in terms of work and time management, and like really getting stuff done, uh,
Mm.
and doing it with so much embodiment that they can literally create perfect symmetry in what they're doing.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Juliet. That's a good
Mm,
note to finish on. And
yeah.
do you know what we'll be doing next week?
Ooh. Do you have any suggestions? Because I haven't decided. I've got a few ideas.
Maybe we could get some suggestions from the audience.
Yes, I would love that.
Yeah. So comment
Comment your
down below if
suggestions.
there's something, yeah, that you want to see or hear from Juliet. That would be great.
Yes.
So is that
Oh,
us complete?
I think so. Hope you
Yes,
enjoyed
one.
my giant offload of information.
I did very much.
Okay. Well, sending love to everyone watching, and I hope you have a beautiful day or night wherever you are. Yeah, I
And we'll
think,
see you next week.
uh, yeah, we'll see you next week. See you actually Friday, but then also see you next week.
Yeah.
Bye.